With this number, with these humble words of the North American bestseller writer, Og Mandino, we open this night to celebrate our most precious treasure, our students. And precisely for our English department students, we have organized an academic event as a sign of gratitude for being part of our college, as well as our lives. As the first moment in our agenda, we have the words of our Dean, Professor Olmedo Garcia. Welcome, Mr. Dr. Olmedo Garcia, please. Is Mr. Garcia there?
Let us check a little bit.
No?
Let me check.
Buenas noches.
Hello, good evening to all of you. Good evening. I think he hasn't joined the meeting yet, so maybe we may continue, and then when he joins the meeting, he will have the opportunity to speak to the audience. Is that okay?
They are don't have enough space to store personal data, and that's when you're in need of a memory card. In which the word bug means something that irritates you. So, application or software, it has so that's basically some faults in the JavaScript PHP. So the program writer has made some mistakes while writing the script, and that ends up
Kaya, Well, let's continue. Since our Dr. Olmedo Garcia is absent for the moment, we will welcome Professor Ladiana Hills. We also have Professor Ladiana Hills, who is also part of our English department. Let's welcome our Professor Ladiana Hills, please. Okay.
Okay, now I can. Okay, good evening. On behalf of the Dr. Olmedo Garcia, Dean of the College of Humanities, he is apologizing for not being with us today. He was ready and eager to be here, but we had some meetings in the university and he had to attend them. That's why he's not here at the moment. Maybe he will join us in a few minutes. Okay. Well, on behalf, as I said, of the Dean of the College of Humanities, Dr. Olmedo Garcia, and myself, I will say good evening to the principals of the English school, Professor Gloria de Ho, Professor Adrian Jimenez. A warm welcome to Dr. James Odlin, who is our invited guest today, to the professors of the English department, and to our dear students. I want to begin my words by saying to our dear students that life is not easy, but nothing is impossible if we try hard enough. Many are the challenges that you will confront, and we are certain that with effort and dedication, you will conquer the future and become excellent professionals with domains of a second language and concerned with the environment and other cultures, thus citizens of the world with the aim of developing our country and our society. My advice is to try to learn from every little thing. Your determination, preparation, and hard work decides your success. Nothing else decides it. Success is not easily achieved, so work hard and later enjoy the rewards. Happy Students' Day, my dear students.
Okay, continuing with this celebration, we have our Professor Gloria de Ho, Director of the English Department, to share some words with us tonight. Please, let's welcome our Professor Gloria Ho. Dear Professor, our heart is joyful to have had the opportunity to receive your experience and mastery of all these years of a college, as a colleague, and also as our director in the English department. But also, proud to know we are going to miss your advice and company in this adventure of learning. Thank you so much. Now,
and this is a new way of life, and it will continue with us for a long time. On-site registration, going to the bank in person, applying for a job personally, even buying products face-to-face are things of the past. Now the words are online, virtually, or by delivery. We have improved the use of different platforms for teaching online. But next year, some of you
Professor, we can hear you.
Hello, everybody. October is a very special month for Universidad de Panama. This year, the university has celebrated its 86th year and Students' Day, the 74th year. As I mentioned it last year, we continue celebrating this activity in a very special way, virtually. And this is a new way of life, and it will continue with us for a long time. On-site registration, going to the bank in person, applying for a job personally, even buying products face-to-face are things of the past. Now the words are online, virtually, or by delivery. We have improved the use of different platforms for teaching online. But next year, some of you will have your classes face-to-face with your teachers. Yes. You will see each other in person, have your chats personally, discuss classes in your rooms, share a cup of tea, coffee, or lunch at the cafeteria face-to-face. Yes, back to campus. The university is there, receiving all of you with open arms, but we have to be responsible of our health. This is a new job for each one. The teachers are very proud of the work done at the English department. It has allowed us to be part of your professional academic life and to help you to get your dreams come true. Graduation is a very special moment for you, the same as for all the teachers. This is the moment when we realize a job well done. Let's have good and positive thoughts about the future. I will take a moment to say goodbye to all of you because I will retire this year. It has been a pleasure and an honor to work and serve you at Universidad de Panama, my home for more than 50 years. Have a happy Students' Day. Enjoy your day. God bless you and a big hug. Bye-bye. Thank you. Hello, everybody.
Dear students, this is Professor Adrian Jimenez. On behalf of the English School, I want to encourage you to continue studying and working hard. I know that at this moment you are passing through a difficult situation due to the pandemic, but remember that God is with you and you represent the hope for a better future for many Panamanians. So don't give up, you can do it. I'm sure that all your dreams will come true. Happy Students' Day. Hi, dear students.
Thank you, Professor Jimenez. Thank you, Professor Gloria Ejo, for your kind words. And now we will ask our speaker to get prepared while we present him. Born in the United States, he spent some years in France and has made Paso Ancho in the province of Chiriquí his home. With advanced degrees from Eisenhower College of the Rochester Institute of Technology, he has worked as a university professor, church pastor, and newspaper editor. Author of more than 24 books, including novels, story, poetry collections, philosophy, travel, translation, and a monumental restoration of the original version of the Gospel of John in 7 volumes. One of his novels is published in his own Spanish and French translations. His father of 2, stepfather of 5, grandfather of 3, and step-grandfather of 12. Welcome, Mr. James David Odling, to this virtual but very warm gathering. Please.
It is a pleasure to say good evening to all of you and to be with you at least virtually. Happy Student Day to everyone at the university, and my particular greetings to my fellow faculty. I was professor myself for many years, any administrators as well, and most importantly, it is my intense pleasure to say good evening and happy Students' Day to all of you students. I commend you students for taking on the task of learning a second language and learning to speak it well. And by that way, you will find in the future that this enables you to expand your mind. You can think more deeply, more eloquently before having another language at your disposal. Immanuel Kant, for example, insisted in his book, Der Reise der reinen Vernunft, that there is no ability for us to think analytically except in language. So the more language we have at our disposal, the more we are able to expand our minds and think. So I commend you for that. Now, I'm about to embark upon the comments that I prepared for you, and I hope very much that I am not entirely clear. Why? Because I hope that after it concludes, you'll have some questions for me. So don't hesitate to keep them in mind and throw them at me when I've finally stopped talking at you. I'm here to talk about literature. These days, unfortunately, literature has become, most importantly, an entertainment and also a means of making money, and as a threshold on the way to Hollywood to make great famous films and make even more money. It used to be that literature was in itself the objective, to prepare something for the world that is meaningful, not just entertaining, and there's nothing wrong with entertainment, but also meaningful. And the greatest literature in history, and I am sure in your classes, your professors exposed you to many of these, the greatest literature in history has more predominantly challenged people to consider new perspectives, to look at life, to look at the world around them in new ways. The greatest literature has also pioneered unexplored regions of art and intellect where no one has ever ventured before. Pioneers, you might say. And the greatest literature has also, at important times in world history, been a revolutionary leader to lead the charge against those who are entrenched in power such that they can take advantage of those underneath them. So yes, literature can entertain, but it's much more important that it do something that lasts forever, something that lifts humanity to a new level. That's what we hope for when we read or when we write literature. If you think of, for example, in English, the author who many consider the best in that language, William Shakespeare, or if you think in Spanish of he who is probably considered the greatest in Spanish literature, Miguel Cervantes de Saavedra, as entertainment, and they do entertain. But if you just think of them as that, you can unfortunately miss much of their significance. Shakespeare, in his time, lampooned the selfish and lazy British royalty that were taking advantage of those underneath their authority. And Cervantes de Saavedra, his work, most famous work, mocks the romantic adventure novels that in his time were extremely popular, but as literature virtually entirely worthless. And so he wrote a book in which an apparently silly old man with his imagination running away from him, created with his life a literature that was better than any of those others. Some of you may also be familiar with the famous novel Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. Certainly it's been turned into a number of movies, and maybe you've seen one of the films. Mary Shelley, wife of one of the great British poets, Percy Bysshe Shelley, wrote this novel, as you know, about a scientist who creates a new human being from parts taken from cadavers. And this novel, while it is extremely thrilling to read, you turn the pages to see what's going to happen. But what is rarely recognized is that Mary Shelley was offering in this novel a strong cautionary tale against scientific discovery outpacing the necessary explorations of human ethic and morality to guide science. Science is great, and ethics is great, but the two together need to explore new ventures in common. And if science simply develops, for example, how to split the atom and how to create a bomb, without morality, without ethics, helping science know how best to apply it, for example, in nuclear generation, but not in destroying Hiroshima and Nagasaki. That is something that is overlooked and that Mary Shelley drew our minds to. And so we see today with this COVID, this worldwide virus created in a laboratory in Wuhan, now killing millions of people worldwide. And in my view, that is entirely because scientific discovery was not matched with serious consideration of the devastating ethical consequences should that science in Wuhan escape control. So I encourage you students who read not just to look for a good rip-snorting novel to take to the beach and enjoy, but to look to have your minds nourished and your souls challenged. And some of you, I dearly hope, will take upon yourselves the joy and the privilege and the responsibility of writing literature. Literature that does far more than merely amuse readers, but more importantly, gives them something to ponder for many years to come. As was mentioned by Professor Chow, yes, I've written a lot of novels. Clearly, I will not live forever, but I hope and I pray that my novels do outlast me for some good time. Why? Because I strove hard in these books that I've put out to provide something that nourishes the mind, that encourages people to look at the world in new perspectives, that makes them think. Something that I hope years later they'll say, boy, I don't remember that novel or who wrote it, but there was something really good in it that made me think. That's what I hope for. That, if anything, will be my immortality. Not to be famous, not to make a lot of money, not to have one of my novels turned into a movie in Hollywood, but rather that I encourage people to see the world in a new way. Writing is, in reality, a very solitary experience. If you wish to be a writer, you need to realize that that is the case. Writing is not done with others. Writing is done alone. And when you are writing, you have to shut yourself off from the world. You have to tell your family and your friends, leave you alone for a little while. You're writing. And yet, like any human being, you also need community from time to time. Moreover, as a writer, you will need community, since a writer's ideas come from her or his interactions with other people. As an example, back in the 1970s, that's back before Noah and the flood and all that. Back in the 1970s, I lived with the great poet David May, who unfortunately deceased a few years ago. When David and I lived in the same house, it was extremely inspiring for both of us to be there in the same room, turning out poetry. I didn't know what he was writing. He didn't know what I was writing. But later when we got time to relax, have supper, drink a glass of wine, we'd share with each other what we had written. And it was such a thrilling experience. So writers need alone time, but they also need interaction time as well. And when I worked in a newsroom, I was for a while a newspaper editor. When I worked in a newsroom, just the daily journalistic grind, nothing famous, nothing to be remembered. I still found it surprisingly helpful for my writing ability to turn out quickly good prose. I had to write the editorials, the commentaries on what was happening in the world. And I found that experience to be very helpful for my writing my own work as well. My solution is, as you may have gathered, to balance the two. Spend time with your friends, your family, but also spend time alone. My best times for writing are when the family isn't going to be bothering me, around dawn or at sunset. Where I live up here in Paso Ancho and Chiriquí, the sunrises and the sunsets are something absolutely spectacular. So for me, the thrill is to get up about 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning and write for a while. And at my window here that you can't see, I can see the sun coming up and it fills me. And I find myself writing even better for having the incredible opportunity of living in your beautiful country and in this beautiful province. Writing is, for those who approach it in a craftsman-like manner, probably something they do more often during the day, and that's wonderful. But my way is to write when I can at the edges of the day, when light and time and the world is changing. Whatever works for you is fine. And if you find that you do that on a regular basis, set a good time for writing, and your family, your friends know that the muse, as I like to speak of her, the muse is the power of inspiration that comes to you. We speak in the traditional Greek terms of Greek legend of the muse. The muse knows that this is the time when she can come to you and share her inspiration with you. And your family, those you live with, will know that that's not a good time to bother you unless the house is on fire. Maybe then. Still, the muse sometimes speaks to me at inconvenient times, when I'm busy with something else, when I'm driving the car, or when I'm socializing. So I've learned over the years, a good practice is for me always to have paper ready in my pocket and a pen or a pencil handy. So if the muse speaks to me when I'm busy doing something else, I can write it down, make some notes, and remind myself later on of what the muse told me. You may be aware of the famous French essayist Montaigne. Montaigne observed in one of his great essays that he was most often struck with great ideas when he just had no ability to follow through on them. If he was riding his horse from Bordeaux to Cluny, he would have to stop his horse, get down, write down the ideas. So he learned methods to remember with notes in his mind while he was riding his horse, so he could deal with that great creative idea later. I also find that during the middle of the night, I'm totally asleep and suddenly, bing, my mind wakes up with this wonderful idea. So I recommend to you my procedure, which is to keep paper and a pencil by the side of your bed, ready in case you have any great ideas. So like a firefighter, always listening for the alarm, I am always prepared to listen and record when the muse speaks to me. And this is important, to have that notepad and that pencil ready in case she comes to you. So this is my covenant with the muse, and I suspect it'll be something like that with you as well. And the more you listen to your muse, the more you listen to your inspiration, the more she will come to you and give you good ideas. It's like a well. Up here in Chiriquí, in Las Tierras Altas, many of us have to use well water. And in fact, I know from my childhood in another rural area up in northern New York State in the United States, if you don't draw water from the well regularly, silt appears and the well will stop producing water and eventually it will go dry. So the more you take water from the well, the more water you have. It seems illogical, but that's how wells work. The more you take, the more you have. The less you take, the less you have. The muse is like a well. She will give you ideas. She will inspire you. Use those ideas. Take advantage of them. And the more you do, the more the muse will come to you and share her thoughts with you. To this end, I recommend you keep that notebook and keep ideas. Another bit of advice for you is this: never throw anything out. So let's say you write a poem, and the next day you look at it and say, that's the worst garbage I've ever written in my life. Don't throw it out. Why? Because there still might be a way that it might turn into something really good. I told you about Living with David May, the famous poet. One day I wrote a poem. I read it and I said, this is the worst piece of garbage. I might as well give up, never write poetry again. And I crumpled it up, threw it in the garbage. David May later on happened to fish it out, and he read it and said, this is excellent. This is a wonderful poem. And he persuaded me to save it. Another poem I wrote really was bad. It was terrible, but it had one good line in it. The line was, the beaches groaned with the weight of the sea. I saved that poem, terrible as it was, because of that one line. Later, that one line found its way into one of my novels. And then later, in another novel of mine, one character tells another, I remember reading a novel in which there was that line, the beaches groaned with the weight of the sea. And so that novel, that line from a absolutely horrible poem that I hope never sees the light of day again, nevertheless found its right place in two different novels. So make those notes when the muse speaks to you. From time to time, copy your notes into another notebook, transcribing them carefully, use full sentences as if you're explaining them to someone else, not just yourself. And everything that goes into that notebook then becomes part of your resource material. I've been keeping a notebook for 50 years. And this is it now. I started it a long time ago, and I'm still writing notes in it for good ideas. I never lack for good ideas. My dreams, if I have a really fascinating dream at night, I write that dream down in my notebook. And nearly every one of my novels is actually based on a vivid dream that I had during the night. Some of my stories too, I've even had songs come to me from dreams. And just the practice of transcribing these notes into the notebook, that gives me even more ideas. So there's no problem with the finding good ideas because they're all around us all the time. So when you have the time to write, go into your notebook, find some good ideas, and just start writing. If you don't feel yourself in a creative mood, read something you wrote before, edit it for a little while, and you'll find yourself becoming creative. I remember one time I wrote into that notebook I showed you 2 conversations. I had no idea who was speaking, but I wrote them down. A says this, B says that, A says this, B says that. For years, they just sat there in the notebook, and then eventually they found their place in, as I say, in one of my novels. Now, the muse may or may not come when you want her to, when you're ready for her, but just be prepared for when the muse comes and speaks to you. Always have that paper ready by your side, so when inspiration comes to you, when a dream comes to you, when you're reading somebody else's book, you say, ooh, that makes me think of something really good. You can write it down in that notebook. As Gautama Buddha, the individual behind the great Buddhist religion, once said, it is the journey that is important, not the destination. So make your journey one of coming to grips with your experiences, of listening to the inspiration that overwhelms you, and your personal reaction to that inspiring experience. This is the asymptotic nature of art. We can never make a perfect work. It will always be less than perfect. Eventually, every one of my novels like a baby growing up before my eyes. I've had to say, okay, you're on your own now. I can't perfect you anymore. So we just keep on moving forward, and our most satisfying experiences are with works that are unfinished. Some of the greatest works ever written are unfinished. I think of Samuel Taylor Coleridge, his famous poem Xanadu. He only wrote the first section of it, and then somebody knocked on the door. He lost the rest of the poem. But this unfinished poem, Xanadu, is one of the greatest poems in the English language. So we can be always open to that inspiration, but we recognize that as human beings, we'll never have it perfect. Moses in the Bible, like a number of prophets, went up the mountain for his inspiration. At the top of the mountain, he spoke with Yahweh, with Jehovah, and he was given an inspiration, something powerful from an infinite being far beyond him. And now he had a problem. He had to come down the mountain again and explain to mere human beings with tiny little minds that only see a finite perspective what this infinite being, the creator of the whole universe, had said. How do you do that? Moses had a problem. That experience he had up in the mountain was perfect, but inexpressible. For as long as he remained on the top of the mountain, he could not communicate that. His second experience at the bottom of the mountain, when he found the people of Israel, as you may recall, making idols of gold, of calves and other animals, was to experience a frustration. How can I explain to these morons who are making these idols what I experienced on the top of the mountain with the real God? It's not something you can easily do. Moses got so frustrated that he broke the tablets across his knee and said, that's it. I'm not even going to try to explain to you idiots. And eventually Yahweh said, come on up here. I want to talk to you again. Moses went up the mountain, came down the second time. This time, fortunately, the people were listening. That's why we have the Torah today, the first 5 books of the Bible. So this is your experience as well. You'll have the inspiration, but then you have to communicate it. You have to find some way to put it into human speech, what you saw so perfectly, vividly. Therefore, don't hesitate to write down those ideas and save them. They will find their place. As you're writing creatively, I'm sure many teachers, especially in your years in the primary schools and in colegio, I am sure that many of your teachers were quick to correct your grammar when it wasn't correct, to tell you to use this punctuation instead of that punctuation. When you're writing creatively, forget about all that. Don't worry about spelling. Don't worry about punctuation. Don't worry about whether your sentences make sense. Just write it down. Just let it flow. Later, when you don't feel that inspiration flowing through you, later is the time when you can edit. It's different parts of the brain that deal with creativity and editing. So don't mess the two up. Don't put them together. When you're writing creatively, just let it flow. Just let it pour out of you. And later, you can come back and edit. There are many good books that'll help you. There are many online resources in the internet that will help you to improve that writing later when the time comes. But take a lesson from good authors like Ernest Hemingway in English or Carlos Ruiz Zafón in Spanish. Spare, clean prose communicates better and often is far more beautiful than prose that tries to sound fancy. If you try to make your prose sound fancy, if you try to make it sound really especially beautiful, you can make your prose opaque. The point of writing is to communicate. So you want to keep your writing clear, concise, simple, and transparent. Literature should be like a window to let people look through it, to see that vista, to see that landscape that you're hoping to describe. So if you get too flowery, too fancy, you cloud up the window and to the point that people can't see that landscape any longer. Now, a few words for those of you who maybe are yearning to be poets. I hope there's a good number of you. A good poet doesn't worry about rhyme, doesn't worry about structure, doesn't worry about whether it fits into this or that category of poetry, the sonnet or the sextet or whatever, just writes. Free verse is poetry just as much as a sonnet. And there is just as much rhythm and meter, assonance and dissonance in free verse. It's just like jazz. Some of you are probably familiar with jazz. Jazz learns the rules in order to break them. And as a poet, you should also learn the rules in order to break them, but learn the rules first. Learn that a good sonnet has a rhyme structure A, B, B, A, C, D, D, C, E, F, F, E, G, G. Once you learn that, then you go ahead and break it, but learn the rules first. As has often been said, poetry is not what is in the words. Poetry is in what cannot be translated. I myself have translated my own poetry into other languages, into Spanish, into French, into German. And I find it a very difficult task because what makes a poem cannot be translated. So that is what you'll learn to do, is learn the rules in order to break them. I also believe this is vitally important, how you spend your time entertaining yourself. If you watch mindless entertainments, if you play a lot of video games, if you watch silly movies that don't do much, you're filling your mind with garbage. If you were to eat just cookies all day or ice cream all day, or worse yet, some of the food-like substances they sell that are made with ingredients that nobody can pronounce, you're filling your body with junk. And as a result, your body will eventually get sick with all that junk. Likewise, we want to fill our minds not with junk, but with good quality. So yeah, watch movies, but watch movies that inspire you. Watch movies that make you think about things in new ways. Read books that challenge you, that take you to new destinations. As you read, if you hit upon a paragraph that is especially interesting, if you read a poem that is especially beautiful, memorize it. Read it out loud to yourself. I especially love to read a good poem in Spanish, French, or Japanese, whatever, and find the beauty in it. Before I moved to Panama, I wasn't able to speak Spanish very well. But even then, I had a particularly beautiful passage from Pablo Neruda memorized. In his Bestiario, there is this line: Si es así, como soy poeta, ¿qué sé yo de la geográfica multiplicada de la noche? This phrase by Pablo Neruda, even before I could speak Spanish very well, inspired me. It thrilled me. It made me seek to be a better poet like Pablo Neruda. And that's what I hope you find in poetry. To read Shakespeare or Hans Schahn or Sappho, to read these people is to have a dialogue with them, to listen to them telling you about their lives and their experiences. And then you can share with them as well. William Blake, the great English poet, he was considered a madman by his contemporaries. William Blake would tell them, well, you know, I had Ezekiel and Isaiah over for dinner the other night, and Ezekiel said this to me, and Isaiah said that, and they'd look at him, think to themselves, he's crazy. But William Blake truly did have these experiences, these theophanous experiences of prophets coming to him, of great poets coming to him, of spirits from other stars coming to him and sharing with him. And William Blake, as I read him myself, he shares with me these experiences, and they inspire me. They thrill me. They make me want to read even more and write even more. Another wonderful thing to do is to engage in wordplay. jokes, double entendre, we call them in French, dobles entendres in Espanol, I think. They make your mind more active, more fertile. They will help you to become a better writer if you play with those, with the fun of words. Another matter to remember is that silence is golden. Don't overwrite. Don't ever overwrite. Say what you want to say. Excuse me. Say what you want to say and stop. Leave some to the reader's imagination. The only exception to this rule is that sometimes for deliberate effect, you may want to overwrite on purpose in order to express irony or sarcasm. In one of my novels, a novel called A Stitch in Time, I have a scene set in the home of an inquisitioner during the Inquisition. And there I deliberately wrote an extremely lapidary prose with beautiful adjectives and little phrases in Latin or in French or in Greek. And it was so deliberately false that it made this scene, the frightening scene in this inquisitioner's home, all that more powerful when I reveal in the prose that over these dinner tables, the light that is shining down on them is coming from people who've been tied to posts and set on fire to kill them. That effect was deliberate, and that's a kind of exception. So when you write, leave something to the reader to work out for herself or himself. Don't tack on explanations. Just let it be what it is. Han Shan, the great 10th century Chinese poet, did not say in one of his poems that he intended to explain Zen in the poem. Rather, what he said was he was sitting and he was looking at the moon and looking at a reflection of the moon in the water. He could see the reflection of the moon on the surface. And he said, there in the water of this pond, there is no moon. And then he concluded with his final line, and in this poem, there is no Zen. Now, I'll try to explain a little bit. What he meant by that is my poem is nothing. It's no more than a reflection, like the reflection of the moon in the water of the pond. But if it reflects Zen, look away from my poem, forget my poem, and look to what Zen is. This is the brilliance of a great poet such as Han Shan, who I recommend to you highly. Don't be afraid of inconsistencies. Don't think you have to explain everything in your writing. Be inconsistent. Let some coincidences remain unexplained. Let improbabilities in your writings be outrageous and celebrate it. Because as I'm sure if you think about your own life is constituted in just this way, improbabilities. I never would have thought that someday I would find myself living in Panama, living such an amazing life in your beautiful country with a beautiful Panamanian family. I never would have thought that. Why? Because I didn't speak Spanish very well. I never considered it. But one night I had a dream. And in that dream, I was standing in a field of wildflowers, looking up at a gorgeous mountain. And I was conscious in the dream that I was in the country of Panama. So that morning after the dream, I asked a friend of mine who travels a lot, you know the country of Panama? And he said to me, oh, yes, it's gorgeous, especially an area called Las Tierras Altas, he told me. And he happened to have a friend in a village called Paso Ancho who had a casita for rent. I called the friend, rented the casita, and I came down, and I've never left. And the mountain in my dream turned out to be Volcan Maru that we have here in Chiriquí. That's an incredible series of coincidences that still I marvel at. That's the way life is. And so to write about that kind of experience is the same for us. I wrote a book about my first experiences in Panama that tells that story in some detail. And it was a thrill for me to tell that story. Now, if you succeed in all this, in not explaining, and just simply telling and describing what it is that you want to tell, You give the reader the opportunity to experience directly what you have written about. If your reader is aware more of reading words on a page, of ink on paper, than of the story you're telling, you have failed. Don't let your writing become opaque. If your writing becomes turgid, if you're trying to mimic a fancy literary style, you have closed the drapes on your window. The curtains are shut and you can't see the beautiful scenery outside. Resist also the temptation to explain or to portray at length, interrupting the pace of your narrative. Let your story tell the story. Let your characters have freedom to do what they need to do. As much as possible, let events or conversation give the reader the background and the descriptions they need. So many writers make the mistake of stopping the action and say, okay, reader, I got to explain a few things to you before we go on with the story. That way you lose the pace of your story and the reader says, oh, this is boring. I'm going to go read something else. So keep that in mind. Let the story tell itself. Every story has its own geometry, and your job is to find the geometry of that story and let it tell itself. At the same time, let the story fly. Let the story tell you the story. Don't write self-consciously or deliberately. Don't force the story to pre-planned direction. Wise readers know when they're being manipulated by the writer. Just as in a movie, you can see, oh, here we go again. Let the story loses its plausibility, its reality, when you force it against its will to serve some other purpose. Rather, like the valley through which the river flows, like our Chiriquí up here, just let the story flow as it will. Most of the time, when I'm writing a novel, I am totally amazed because suddenly the story takes a direction that I hadn't anticipated. The characters want to do things that I hadn't planned, and they take on a life of their own, and they surprise me. If they surprise me, the author, they'll surprise the reader as well. That's the mark of good writing, is when it doesn't follow traditional storylines. It does something new. It does something unusual. Immanuel Kant, the great German philosopher, said there are two important things to keep in mind: form and content. It's like a glass that holds wine, or like my cup that holds coffee. The cup is the form. The coffee inside is the content. You have to have the two together, Kant said. So we keep that form in mind, but we also keep that content in mind as well, and aim to express the two of them clearly together. Every work you write should be allowed to find its natural place, somewhere between the two poles of communicability and beauty. If a poem or a story only makes sense to you, the poet, the writer, then beautiful as it may be, it hasn't communicated. Yet at the other extreme, a poem or a story that is completely comprehensible in meaning is uninteresting and unlovely. Most writers, I think, try to find a good balance point between these two poles of beauty and comprehensibility. Don't be afraid to venture closer to one or to the other. As you write your story, as you write your poem, you'll find each work has its own unique intrinsic balance. In this manner, therefore, experiment. There's only one way to become good at the craft of writing, and that is by doing it, by experimenting, by challenging yourself, by seeking new ways to work at this craft. The absolute worst way to learn any art, and I'm saying this as a professor myself, is in the classroom. Just as learning a language in the classroom is not the best way. The best way to learn a language is by talking with people who speak it. When I arrived here in Panama, within 2 months, I was speaking Spanish. How? Because I walked around the neighborhood talking to people, and I'd say to them, correct my Spanish, please. If I say something wrong, tell me what I said wrong. Help me to be better. And they did. And in 2 months, I was speaking Spanish. That's the way to do it. The best way then for you as an individual is to explore your talent, to explore your writing, to go in new directions and not be afraid to do so. And then hand it to somebody else, say, read it. Tell me what you think. Be honest, tell them. If you don't like it, tell me you don't like it, but say why. If you do like it, great, but tell me why. Your friends, your readers, they will help you to become better writers. So despite the common saying we have in English that you should only write about what you know, that's foolishness. That's cowardly. Write about what you feel. Write about what you believe. I've never been a woman, for example. I don't mean to surprise you about this, but I've never been a woman. But 3 of my novels are written from the point of view of a woman narrator. And I've had several women tell me that I did a pretty good job, despite my handicap of being a mere male, that I did a pretty good job. One of my novels, in fact, is probably my best known novel, is written from the point of view of a tree. A tree tells the story, yes. And again, I don't mean to surprise you, but I've never been a tree in my whole life. I've always been a human being. And yet I think I managed that viewpoint pretty well in that novel of a tree telling the story. It's the tree is the last member of its species of trees because humanity has cut down all the other members of its species of tree in order to build their homes, to make fires, to cook their suppers. And this last tree tells its story. If you expect to make a lot of money from writing, forget it. The money I've made from all of my books is almost nothing. The great percentage of the profits from my books that have been published go to the publishers. It's a big business these days. For all my something like 26, I think, books in print, I've made very little financial gain. To be honest, the book publishing industry today is extremely corrupt. It's dominated by executives who are only interested in profit. They wouldn't know a good book if it hit them over the head. All they want is to make a profit. They're not interested in whether you write a good story, whether you write a beautiful poem. They only are interested in profit. And so, as you may have realized, some of the most famous books these days are supposedly written by famous movie stars or famous singers. They didn't really. It's a ghostwriter wrote them, and the famous person just puts the name on the cover because it's that name that will sell the book and make a lot of money for these book publishing executives. There's a major French company called Hachette that owns most of the publishing companies in the United States and indeed in the world. And it's in the business of making money. It used to be that books were published because they were good. Now they're published because they make money. Unfortunately, I'm not a famous actor. I'm not a popular singer. So my books don't make money, and my books are therefore not popular with these book executives. Nobody ever made a big pile of money writing poetry unless they sold their soul to the devil like Faust, or because fame was forced on them like Edgar Allan Poe or Jean Cocteau. So someday if you make money by writing, I'm thrilled for you, but don't expect it. If you write because it's in you, because like Jeremiah the prophet says in the Bible, it's a fire shut up in my bones. I cannot keep it within. That's why you should write. When I'm writing, I'm seeing the characters in my mind's eye. I'm simply describing what I see. And there's no experience for me as thrilling as when I get to the final page or so of a novel that I've been working on for some time. The last words, I have tears pouring out of my eyes to write those last words of the novel. Simple amazement at how beautiful this story has been. For me, it's a moment of awe, a moment of transcendence, that I'm just a regular, ordinary guy, but that something this beautiful, something this amazing has come out of me, just little old me, that I wrote it. Pablo Picasso, the great artist, the great Spanish artist, he said it in French, l'art pour l'art, arte por arte. art for the sake of art in English. Picasso, who by the way also was a playwright, he wrote one absolutely terrific play. Picasso created his great paintings not because he hoped to make a point, not because he hoped to make some money, but because that was in him to be expressed. He had no other choice but to do so. So I hope, if it is in you to be a great writer, that you write not to please others, but because you must write. L'art pour l'art. Don't be afraid to use those talents. As I see it, a writer's least important goal is to entertain. And a writer is fooling herself if she thinks she's going to make money at it. The highest goal is to record what the spirit, what the muse gives you to say. And second only to that, often identical to it, is for you, the writer, to strive to be a pioneer, to lead in new directions that have never been explored, and a revolutionary, to challenge the status quo, to look at things in new ways, to shock, to encourage. Voltaire, another great French writer, he realized that a writer is more powerful against oppression and injustice than an entire army. He said, the pen is mightier than the sword. And he is right, because the impact of books such as Uncle Tom's Cabin, which a great novel, which in itself did more to end slavery in the United States than any other effort, or Black Beauty by Anna Sewell, which it was a revolutionary book that encouraged people to think about other species of life, animals, as worthy of good treatment, not of being maltreated, but well. Or Alexander Solzhenitsyn, who in his famous book, The Gulag Archipelago, described what it was like to live in the communes of Russia underneath a oligarchy in such a way that oligarchy eventually had no choice but to change. Think, for example, of the works of Jules Verne and H.G. Wells, two of the earliest science fiction writers who helped the world believe that it was not only feasible, but worthwhile to leave our home planet, to travel among the stars. Without Jules Verne, without H.G. Wells, you may know Jules Verne from The Earth to the Moon, or H.G. Wells, The War of the Worlds, The Invisible Man. Without these authors encouraging us to think of the possibilities of leaving our planet, we probably never would have put people on the moon. But we put them on the moon because of someone who wrote fiction. That pioneer made it possible for Neil Armstrong to step out on the surface of the moon. Likewise, the pace of the 20th century would have been very different if it weren't for authors like Gustave Flaubert or James Joyce, Anais Nin, Lawrence Durrell, and Henry Miller, who opened our eyes to aspects of human nature not portrayed in literature ever before. Dante, Dostoevsky, Charles Williams, and others have made us see our world in different and new ways. This is the truth. Often people say to me about my nonfiction works that they're filled with new and interesting ideas, and I tell them my novels have more truth in them. Fiction has more truth than my nonfiction, and I sincerely believe that. There is a reason that Jesus of Nazareth, Gautama Buddha, Muhammad, and other great teachers, peace be upon all of them, taught us truth using parables, using stories, using fiction. Because these stories, although they may seem to be unreal, fictional, they nevertheless are filled with truth. So believe in your muse and write accordingly. Have the courage to speak in your own voice. Many people write books, but few ask themselves whether what they have to say is worth saying. It is a rare wisdom to know what to say and what not to say. So some writers will advise you not to talk about a word in progress. Do talk about it. Do carry on with it. And no matter what, keep writing. Don't give up. Persist in it. A lot of what you write will be terrible. There's a lot of stuff I've written. I hope you never see it, but keep writing so that that will continue, that well that you have will continue to produce sweet water. Write, edit later. If you're having trouble with one piece of writing, go to another. No rule that says you have to write a novel from beginning to end. Write another part of the novel. Pick whatever part of the story appeals to you and keep writing so that it becomes easier. Everything I've written, fiction or nonfiction, eventually comes alive and takes me over. And it's a fire, as Jeremiah said, that I cannot shut up in my bones. It's a wonderful feeling, and I hope you experience it as well. Thank you for your attention. Hello?
Thanks a lot, Professor James Audley.
Sure.
I guess our Master of Ceremonies has his mic off. Thank
Okay,
you.
here we go. Mine is on. No,
Yes.
no, it's here. Wait. My microphone is on.
Yes, we can hear you
Yes, we
now.
hear you.
It's on. Yes,
can
my
hear you.
microphone is on. Oh, Professor Otley, we definitely have had a fortune of having you tonight. And we will never forget this awesome and inspiring speech, which will lead us to the next part of this event. A couple of months ago, thinking about how difficult it has been for many students to get an internet connection, adequate device, and above all, tranquility to study in the middle of a world crisis. A group of professors created an initiative to motivate students with creativity and sense of pertaining to the English career. As we launched at the first colorful posters in the English school, some students accepted the challenge to participate, creating their version of the 2021 topic, which was studying English as a career. The judges, a selected group of professors from our department, was responsible for selecting the winners and the poster that will represent our enrollment campaign for 2022. It was formed by Professor Juventina Tuñón, Adrián Jiménez, and Veronica Forte, to whom we will leave space to read their decision.
Good and blessed evening to our dear authorities of the College of Humanities and the English Department, to our dear students and colleagues of the school, of the English School of the Universidad de Panama, and also to our invited guests. First, I want to extend our greetings on Students' Day to all of you that are connected. We want to wish you the best in life. I have the responsibility to represent the committee that had to evaluate the poster that you submitted. It wasn't an easy task to evaluate each one of the posts because we believe that, and we agreed that all the posters were very creative. So I want to share first the criteria that the judges used in order to select the winners. One of them was arrangement, space distribution, neatness, creativity, originality, topic accuracy, graphical context, language pose, use of English language. Those were the criteria that the three judges had to take into consideration in order to select the 3 first winners. It is important to share that we had five participants. We had 5 students that decided to take the challenge. So we are going to mention, although the decision was only first, second, and third places, I think we need to honor those other 2 that also participated. So in 4th and 5th places, 4th place, we have Ana Lorena R. and Siul Atehari. They were the 2 last winners, or the 2 last participants. And then from bottom to top, in 3rd place, we have Marian Franco. That's at the 3rd place. And in 2nd place, we have Shadi. And in the 1st place, and the winner of this contest is LCQ. As you notice, we did not know the names of the students. They all had a pseudonym, a nickname. So we do not know the students that participated, but in behalf of the committee and the judges, we want to congratulate each one of the students that took the challenge and that did submitted their work, because we are more than conscious that participating in this type of activities help you to enhance your knowledge in the language and also help you to become a more holistic student. So congratulations again and happy Students' Day.
Let us congratulate the authors of these wonderful works and feel proud of our students who will receive 3 prizes consisting of a humble metallic recognition made of the contribution of generous professors who donated funds for this cause. And last but not least, we would like to make a special recognition to 55 outstanding students who are part of the Sigma Lambda chapter of Honor 2021. Their extra effort and enthusiasm have enhanced this second pandemic year with good grades of hope. For this reason, our Students' Day Commission has asked for the support of sponsors who join our satisfaction and pride and who wanted to contribute with their inspiration for excellence. Company Ultracon Panama has donated 10 gift certificates with a value of $30. And Grand Morrison and Suzaeta sent us books for each one of the students. Their names are Arenas Christi, Aldovan Eliezer, Elaine Karen, Aparicio Gisak, Arosemena Dana, Bermúdez María, Boniche Uciel, Castillo Erika, Castillo Julio, She Lilibet, Chon Hilda, Contreras Alexander, Cordero Cristín, Cruz Edward, Delgado Ian Carlos, Delgado María, Flores Rafael, Foster Crisanto, García Andrés. Seguimos. González Mirna, Guerra Alejandro, Guerrero Isaac, Halpin Ana, Hennis Jocelyn, Hernández Emily, Hernández Erika, Jiménez Ángela, Joita Amena, Nob Claudia, Ley Lian, Lescano Lisbeth, Limnio Caubi, López Edwin, López Loida, López Ramsés, Monroy Nicanor, Nieto Junior, Olivo Jairo, Portugal Lía, Prosper Johan, Quintero María, Reigosa Angélica, Riascos Daniela, Rodríguez Daniel, Rodríguez Jonathan, Rodríguez Verónica, Romero Andreina, Zamudio Denis, Sánchez Juliana, Solís Ezequiel, Tejada Jessica, Torres Azucena, Turcios Ana, Vega Lilianis, Villarreal Zoila. On October 27, 1944, the Students' Federation of Panama organized a number of strikes and protests to fight for their right to receive a high-quality education, free of discrimination and political manipulation. In 1948, it was declared the Students' Day in the Republic of Panama as a reminder of the goals of education and the power of critical thinking and justice. As each year, the English department wants to congratulate those who make the choice of studying and being part of this wonderful career that open a lot of doors. Thanks to our authorities for being with us, to our kind speaker, our professors, our magnificent sponsor, Grant Morrison, Susaeta, Ultracom, and all the teachers who donated in different ways to make this an awesome evening. See you soon.
Thank you, Professor Clovis. We also want to have a special recognition to our crew from the Students' Day Commission. They are Beatriz Tinoco, Elías de León, Modesto de León, Suri Palacios, Juventina de Gracia, Rosa de Gracia, Verónica Forte, Corina Rodríguez, Jessica Picard, Esteban Romero, Leonidas Espinosa, Stephen Green, Jorge Clovis, Omari González, Mabel Batista, Joel Álvarez, Rubén Castillo, Alexis González, and Nadia Castillo. And this talking here, Professor Lucy Chow. We know that some of the students wanted also to have a little word to Professor James, because they wanted to make questions too. So if you would like to, Professor, the students have some questions for you. Do you agree with that?
Of course, of course.
Great. So who's the student? Who are the students who want to ask these questions? Daniel.
I see here, Daniel, yes.
Hi, everybody. Hi, Professor, classmates. Happy Students' Day to all my classmates. Well, nice to see all the teachers, some of them incredible, well, all of them incredible, sorry. Nice to meet you, Mr. James. I have a question related to, for example, I love to read and I am making my own books also.
Good for you.
Thank you. So, for example, I think you talk about something, for example, when we send, when somebody tell us like we cannot do this thing or we have to change. What is your opinion about, for example, when you create something and you think that is exactly, that is what I want, for example, as my creation, I want to put that, but people think that no, that's not the correct way, or that that is something that is not good for the story, but you want it because you think it's perfect. What is your opinion about that?
Leave it the way it is. I've had many times editors of magazines or book editors tell me, well, if you change this novel in such and so a manner, and they tell me what they want, that we'll print it. And I've always told them, Daniel, I've always told them, nope, will not do. I wrote it the way I intended to write it, and it stays that way. If you don't like it, fine. I remember a story I wrote, oh gosh, back in the early 1980s. And I submitted it, excuse me, I submitted it to a magazine. The editor called me up and he said, I like it, but I'm not going to put it in my magazine unless you do thus and so with it. And he gave me an outline of what he wanted me to do. And I said, no, I'm not going to do it. He said, okay, I won't print it then. He contacted me, I think about 5 years later, saying, you know, I can't get that story out of my head. I'll publish it as it is. And he did. And it's actually one of my better known short stories. So that, Danielle, is my message to you. Stay true to your muse. Believe in what the inspiration told you and don't let anyone change it. Do listen to advice. Do listen to what people say. Editors, friends, family, listen to what they say. If it makes sense to you, if it might help you to improve your approximation of what the muse told you, good. But if it doesn't, say thank you very much and leave it as it is. That's my answer.
Thank you.
De nada.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, James. If we have any other question for our invited guest.
I wasn't that clear. There must be another question.
Yes, there must be another question. This is very good for us because as we are studying English, we are also trying to learn how to communicate, not only in our native language, but in a second language, which
Yes.
makes sometimes it's very difficult, even for people who know how to communicate. When it comes to literature in a second language, we also have some difficulties because our expressions, when we try to move them to the second language, are not the same.
Mhm.
So sometimes we have this doubt and in how to express something for foreign language, for foreign readers. For example, if I wanted to write something in English for people that are native in English, what should I do? Should I use my constructions in that I have in Spanish, or try to look, what do you think? Try to look for the expression, the exact expressions that you use in English as native speakers?
That is a wonderful question. And it's, for obvious reasons, it's a question that I ponder a great deal. When I am holding a conversation with someone, I'm thinking in whatever language we're speaking in. If my wife only speaks Spanish, she hardly knows any English. So when I'm talking with her, I'm talking in Spanish. And when I'm talking in Spanish, I'm not doing as some gringos do. I'm not thinking in English and quickly translating in my head and telling her my translation. I'm thinking in Spanish as I speak to my wife in Spanish. Or if I'm talking to my brother on the telephone back in the United States, I'm thinking in English and I'm speaking to him in English. So Professor Chow, my answer to the question is this. Some of my writings work well in one language and not in another. I wrote a story many years ago in French. The story simply would not possibly work in English. It had to be written in French because French was the language that expressed what that story was trying to say. There was no other way to do it but write it in French. I've had the same thing with poems in Spanish. Some of my poetry comes out in Spanish. My effort to translate one of my novels into French and Spanish was extremely difficult. I happen to know the author of the novel very well, but he wrote that novel in English. And for me to put it into a new language was extremely difficult. So my answer is, when you're writing something, think in that language. Don't struggle to find a phrase in English that expresses your thought in Spanish, but let it be in English if English is what you're writing, and just let it happen naturally. And I think you'll find it be a better result by that manner. Does that at all answer your question? I hope.
Yes, of course, definitely. And we definitely want to have you more in our English department. I know Professora Gloria Ho, Professor Adrian Jimenez, they will be happy to have you as an invited speaker in some other occasions, because you have been very inspiring. And I think I'm happy and I want to write something right now.
Good, do it.
So we want to thank you. We want to thank our authorities for the support. Lady Diana, please, thanks so much for our support. Thanks, Beatriz, all the professors, Professor Joel, who has been here in the technical part at meeting and transmitting in YouTube and doing all this stuff. We did it with all our heart. We're very happy to have such great students who have struggled this pandemia, this thing. And we definitely are happy with this activity, even though we went a little bit crazy with the times and all. So thanks so much. And we hope this has been a very good Students' Day for all of us, because we professors are also students.
Yes.
Learning always. Thanks a lot, and see you soon, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you all for inviting me.
Thank you.
Thank you so very much. It was a pleasure.
Thank you for the invitation.
Bye.
Thank you, Mr. James, again.
Bye, Professor. Bye.
Take care.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you for